Hey everybody, this is Sophia Florence, one of the hosts of the Crumbling podcast, and I'm here to tell you that we have new tiers on Patreon. And I know what you're thinking. Do I want to pay more for this podcast? Hell yeah, because you're going to get some cool shit with it. Our early supporter tier is now one of the new ones. Obviously, we have the old Help Us Grow one, which is just $3 a month. That gives you access to our episodes early and gives you access to our special episodes called Crumbs. The early supporter tier, which is $6 a month, gives you early access to the episodes like the other one, gives you some exclusive behind-the-scenes content. So there could be clips, bloopers, more other things that we'll be adding to the Patreon. A physical sticker pack, which is fun and themed designs produced by our illustrator, Chris Terendi. Patreon-only updates and polls that'll help shape our future content. So that'll be really exciting if you want to kind of be more of an active participant in what we're doing here. And it's, just kind of a perfect thing for fans who want a sneak peek and exclusive goodies. There's some really fucking cool designs. I can't wait till y'all see them. If you want to go a little bit more than that, we have the super fan tier that is $20 a month. That gives you early access to all the episodes. It gives you those behind the scenes episodes and extras. It'll give you access to something that the other ones don't have, which is a limited edition t-shirt. We've got one right now. It's super cool. I am not even going to show it to you guys. Probably have more designs over the years. If you want the shirt, come get it. It's $20 a month for that. Ideal for anyone who loves merch. They want to, tell people about our podcast and they don't want to actually talk about it. Some of us are introverts. You don't want to talk about shit. You just want to be a billboard, and I'm cool with that. And also, it's the same art that's on the stickers. It is super rad, and 40% of the tier's proceeds go directly to supporting our illustrator's work. That is Chris Terendi. He's at Chris Terendi, Tirendi art.com. ChrisTerendiart.com. Give it a look. I hope that some of you will join, and I hope that you will take part in some polls and tell us what you want. We want to make the content that you want within the confines of the stuff that we like to do. Please go to our Patreon, patreon.com/The Crumbling Podcast, and join today. Welcome to NPR. This is Ira Ass. Sorry.
Please put that in as like a clip, please. Oh my God, I'm dying.
Welcome to the Crumbling Podcast, a show all about gifted grifters shifting your sanity and how you can punch them in the very tip of the penis. I'm your host, Sophia Florence, and I'm here with my co-host, V. Devin isn't with us tonight because he's changing the tires on a flying car or something.
Ooh.
Today, we're going to continue our historical look at the right-libertarian movement, a movement that took the American ideals of capitalism and limited government to new and more absurd heights. We're going to get into some of the most defining characteristics of most libertarian thinkers that were expressed early into the movement and still continue to this day. We should talk about where we were before, though.
To recap the last episode, we covered some of the earliest origins of libertarianism from the 1700s to the 1800s. On the left, libertarianism was a term that referred to anarcho-socialists. These are socialists who reject the state and believe in freedom and autonomy for all people. On the right, well, libertarianism wasn't really used as a word for anyone associated with capitalism for quite a bit longer. We offered definitions for capitalism and socialism.
Capitalism is a system where capital or the means of production are privately owned, and a profit is made off of the labor done on those means of production by workers. As a reminder, the means of production means anything that could be used to create goods and services, such as housing for rent, machines, buildings, and etc., etc., etc. By profit, we mean a value generated in excess of overhead costs and labor costs, which is not returned to the laborers themselves, but kept for the owners.
And socialism is a system where capital, or the means of production, are controlled by the workers either through an intermediary like a government, directly by the workers themselves, or through democratic processes. There's a lot of ways to do socialism, and they all have different names, but that's besides the point.
We also talked about Adam Smith and some other boring talking bewigged heads from the 1700s and 1800s. If you're just arriving to the story in this episode, we recommend listening back on that if you want a more comprehensive view of those definitions. Today, though, we'll be moving into the early 1900s, World War I, the Roaring '20s, and the Great Depression, which is somehow not something I feel every time I turn on the news lately.
Lucky.
There's a lot that happens in this period, and I want to look at it all through the lenses of two specific, I want to say people, but just assholes for this episode. Henry Louis, or H.L. Mencken, and Albert Nock. We'll, of course, visit other contemporaries, but these two are very noteworthy contributors to the movement and had very public impacts. In fact, Nock was one of the first Americans, and especially of those of a more right-leaning political persuasions, to refer to himself as a libertarian, as well as describing himself as a quote-unquote philosophical anarchist. That term was referenced by other folks on libertarian right thereafter, including Robert Heinlein. We won't do a deep dive into Heinlein, but you may be familiar with some of his work, even if just through cultural references. He was the writer of the book Starship Troopers, which was adapted, even if loosely, into the movie of the same name, and his book Stranger in a Strange Land coined the term grok, which existed in the book as a term people from Mars used to say that they understood something at a very deep level. Mencken, on the other hand, eschewed political labels entirely. He's probably better understood as someone who is more kind of a contrarian as opposed to having any sincerely held political beliefs. He referred to himself as being in quote-unquote permanent opposition to the culture of the day. I should mention that these two are not the only people making these developments at the time, but that they are the people who provided a lot of influence for libertarian thinkers to come, are frequently cited by modern libertarians, and give a good view of the movement blooming at that time. These two men were born 10 years apart, Nock in 1870 and Mencken in 1880. Both became journalists. Nock had a brief stint in minor league baseball and then as an Episcopal priest first, for a period of 12 years. Mencken did an even more brief stint in his father's cigar factory, totaling only 3 years. For better or worse, both were men who were drawn into the written word. Mencken went on to co-found a magazine called The American Mercury in 1924, although he resigned from his editing position there in 1933. This magazine had published Nock's work, and they'd both comment on each other a few times throughout their history, but their interactions really aren't what's notable about them. It's their thoughts, their entire ideology. You see, both of these guys built some of the real intellectual substance of what became known as the alt-right, which is one of the major parent movements of the right-libertarian movement. The Mises Institute, a right-libertarian think tank that we mentioned briefly during the climate change episodes, discusses these two men in a way that I find a little shocking. They're mentioned to be elitist and anti-democratic openly. If I wanted to get people interested in my philosophy and my political thoughts, that's probably not exactly the foot that I'd start off on, but that's what really gets the first core characteristic of the right-libertarian movement, although it often gets swept under the rug. An article from the Mises Institute titled Nock and Mencken on Democracy and Equality discusses this.
So I did read this to prep for the show, and it's honestly shocking how they flaunt this. It's not something hidden in subtext. I'll quote this first part, which was written on Nock. With The Myth of a Guilty Nation, published in 1922, Nock influenced an entire generation of classical liberals, opposing Wilsonian internationalism and arguing for anti-militarism. From 1920 to 1924, he was the editor of the weekly journal, The Freeman. His writings are mostly elitist, based as they are on the fundamental role of the individual capable of elevating himself over the mass of the people. His thought is anchored in a strong individualism, explicitly critical of any forms of statism. Nock has a disenchanted approach to democracy, mainly based on the idea that the lowering of the level of culture and education is related to the democratic ideology. Enlarging the suffrage would not do any better, and his only result would be the destruction of the highest ranks of culture. Yeah, I don't think you could pay a lot of the modern right-wing movement leaders, even libertarians, to admit that kind of thing publicly, but the Mises Institute is the libertarian think tank. Nock, knowing that he wasn't alone in thinking this, doubled down later in his life. In his memoirs entitled Memoirs of a Superfluous Man. Oh, that's a pretty great memoir title, I gotta say.
It's wild.
Wow. And I'm going to quote him in a second, but I'd like to give a preference of this. He uses two words here that are not really in common use these days. One is equalitarian, which is synonymous with egalitarian. The other is educable, which is synonymous with educatable, but somehow harder to say. Anyway, on with the quote. Our preceptors were gentlemen as well as scholars. There was not a grain of sentimentalism in the institution. On the other hand, the place was permeated with a profound sense of justice. An equalitarian and democratic regime must consequence assume, tacitly or avowedly, that everybody is educable. The theory of our regime was directly contrary to this. Our preceptors did not see that doctrines of equality and democracy had any footing in the premises. They did not pretend to believe that everyone is educable, for they knew, on the contrary, that very few are educable. Very few indeed. They saw this as a fact of nature, like the fact that few are 6 feet tall. That's not really true anymore. Anyway, they accepted the fact that there are practicable ranges of intellectual and spiritual experience, which nature has opened to some and closed to others.
Yeah, it's the most dick move I feel like anybody's ever made in literature. I feel like even the text itself feels very up its own ass.
Ooh.
When anybody's like, on the contrary, very few indeed. It's like you're agreeing with yourself in your own right, you smarmy fuck.
Yeah, you're elitist.
Like, it's goofy.
Yeah, it really is.
It's very goofy, and he's not going down the road of trying to make his own mail service, which I guess is a win compared to some of the folks like Lysander Spooner, but you're not really winning on this one. These are two deeply elitist and weird men that are like just profoundly antisocial. Yeah, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Seriously. Yeah, they're just ugh.
Nasty. So in the next part of the article from the Mises Institute, they talk about Mencken, and they choose to quote a passage that he wrote. I'll read it and let the audience process this. He said, "All government, in its essence, is a conspiracy against the superior man. Its one permanent object is to oppress him and cripple him. If it be aristocratic in organization, then it seeks to protect the man who is superior only in law against the man who is superior in fact. If it be democratic, then it seeks to protect the man who is inferior in every way against both." The idea that all men are created equal is not exactly something contained here. And granted, the founding fathers of the U.S. didn't exactly believe that idea either, cough, cough, slavery. But most Americans pay lip service to it, at least. And for guys like Mencken and Nock, they just kind of lead with the aristocracy. In both of these men, though, a lot of ideas were outside of orthodoxy, sometimes in good ways and most of the time in bad ways. And that's a second very important defining feature of right libertarianism. Mencken notoriously mocked very religious people, especially during the trial often referred to as the Scopes Monkey trial, which resulted from a lawsuit against a teacher who was accused of violating a Tennessee law banning the teaching of evolution. Mencken was not a friend to any people of any race and had wildly racist things to say about literally everyone, from Jews to black folks to even Anglo-Saxons. This guy wrote a racist screed about Anglo-fucking-Saxons,
That's
which is
nuts. Oh my gosh.
It's an odd kind of racism for its time. But he still stood against things like lynching and like tried to get laws passed against lynching.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, you hate everyone, but you'd rather nobody kill them, which I guess is a way to be as a person.
It's so weird. It's the same weird contradictory stuff as the libertarians do now. And it's just like, oh.
Yeah. Like he was part of some high society club in Baltimore, and someone was, their one Jewish member left. And he's like, we tried to find another Jew, but we couldn't find one suitable. And like, that's almost a direct quote, which is just like an insane thing to say. No one was spared this man's smoke, but it was all evil. Like, it's just like really fucking horrible person.
Oh my gosh.
But on the other hand, back to Nock, he started his journey in politics as a believer in a philosophy on taxation and politics known as Georgism, which stemmed from a guy with two first names, Henry George. Georgism was a big influence on politics for a broad range of people at that time. It advocated only a single tax, one on the value of land, which folks on the right appreciated a lot as a way to minimize the system of taxation and make it simple. George and many of his followers also advocated for a universal basic income, which is something that's popular both on the right and left, and actually mostly comes from the right, and municipalization of certain public services, especially those related to transportation and telecommunication, which appealed to folks on the left. We'll talk more about George in future episodes because he is a really influential figure here, but he'd take a good 20 episodes to himself if we really wanted to talk about him and his impacts. The man was just out there doing shit. Going back to Nock, though, he was decidedly against a lot of the features of Georgism outside of the advocacy for a single land value tax and free trade. However, a big move in his early career was editing the Georgist publication, The Freeman, which we talked about before, from 1920 to 1924. Afterwards, he left and stayed as a freelance journalist, albeit with the funding of some wealthy admirers, and continued to publish books on his own and some articles in various publications, Reader's Digest and that kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah, Reader's Digest.
It's been around forever, hasn't it?
It's been around forever, and like if you look at Reader's Digest stuff like in like the 1920s through 40s, it's racist as fuck.
Oh wow, okay.
I know that, like, a lot of us, like, that grew up in the 80s, 90s, aughts, like, know of Reader's Digest as that weird magazine that's always on your grandmother's coffee table. And, like, it's, very chicken soup for the soul kind of shit. But, like,
I used to go over to my grandma's house, sit on the love seat, and eat Klondike bars and read the jokes page. It was great.
Yeah, same.
That was one of my favorite memories.
Same, except drumsticks over Klondike bars.
Ah, okay.
Because drumsticks absolutely fuck.
It's like ooh, but instead it's me coughing, trying to make sure that I'm no ooh. I don't think that these men can easily be defined by what they're for. Both spoke out against American entry into World War I, which is, of course, a complicated thing, and I don't think that we really need to litigate the merits of that on the show. They also spoke out against the New Deal reforms from Franklin Delano Roosevelt that came after the Great Depression. This is the third real key feature of right libertarianism in America, a pure and irrational hatred of the New Deal, as well as really any part of the government that exists specifically to help people, as opposed to just maintaining the basics of law and order. The New Deal was a series of wide-ranging reforms which came in two packages between the years of 1933 and 1936. One of the most important ones, and one that will come up quite a bit later, is what's called the Glass-Steagall Act, which separated commercial and investment banking. It was repealed in 1999, and a lot of economists and other commentators argue over whether or not this repeal was responsible for the financial crisis in 2008. And if you want my opinion, it was.
I will give more opinions on that in the episodes where we talk about 2008, because that was a big year for libertarianism, and
so big.
It's almost indisputable that that's true. The New Deal also replaced the gold standard, which is something that libertarians will fixate on later to a degree that's unhealthy and weird and also like tragicomic. It's very stupid how much they're like, if we had our money backed by gold, it would fix all of our problems. Yeah. You could back your money with any object, but that object has varying worth anyway. Like,
didn't they try to make us go back to the gold standard recently, like in Congress?
Some Trump people have talked about it.
That's what I was thinking.
It would be stupid. It would be the biggest deflationary event in history, and the cost of goods would basically drop through the floor and no one would know what to do.
Wow.
It would be utter fucking chaos. Yeah. And it's also like any object could be your standard for currency. Like it could be pants. Like you could just be like,
I'm rich then.
Yes, these pants are, my currency is backed by pants. And that would be just as useful, because like gold has varying worth over time. And like, yes, it has gotten worth more over time, but that's like kind of just dumb luck.
Yeah, it's like, man, it's like Bitcoin. I have no idea what the heck that's pegged to.
Yeah.
God knows. God knows.
Nothing,
really. It's just, the stock market, but weird.
It's in the stock market, but for goons.
Yeah, exactly.
Bunch of fucking goons.
Yep.
But anyway, the New Deal also created the SEC, or Securities and Exchange Commission, which you might have heard about a lot on the news recently, which originally had the goal of preventing another economic collapse, as well as keeping corporations from just ripping people off. Its inaugural chairperson was none other than Joseph Kennedy, the father of John F. and Robert F. Kennedy, and grandfather to our new master of regulations and devotee of the plague lord Nurgle, Robert F. Kennedy. Sorry.
Boy, oh boy.
I'm trans. There has to be a reference to Warhammer.
Well done. Well done. No, really, it's important. Further programs in the New Deal include the National Labor Relations Act, which enshrined into law the right to collective bargaining through unions, the Rural Electrification Act, which helped rural areas, get electricity, and the Food and Drugs and Cosmetics Act, which gave the FDA the power to test food, drugs, and cosmetics. The Social Security Act, which started the Social Security Administration, a lot of infrastructure jobs, and so much more good stuff. It also started redlining, the famously bad practice of denying financial services like mortgages to people within certain neighborhoods and based entirely on race or ethnicity.
Yeah. Yeah, the New Deal is complicated. Like, libertarians are against all of the good parts of it, which is just their thing. I can't fix that. I can't help them with that. I don't know how you end up hating people so much that you're like, I don't like the good things that happen to them.
No, nobody's allowed to have good things happen at all.
I don't like when good things happen to those motherfuckers. If it costs me a cent, I swear to God.
It's true. That's really how they feel. And it's kind of like seeped into the right further, just the conservative, moderate right in a way that's bad.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, people talking in the Bush era about privatizing Social Security, and everyone was like, that will never happen because it's very stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
And now we're fucked.
Yeah.
No, we're not fucked. We're going to do things. We're going to get out of this. We're going to survive because we're fucking good people, and we got this. And
exactly.
If you're listening to the show, I love you, and maybe Patreon.
Yes.
Anyway. This is also like a really funny historical moment for the word liberal in America. Prior to this point, this was a word reserved for the kind of classical liberalism we defined in the last episode, really the stuff that grew into right libertarianism. During this era, though, FDR sort of redefined American liberalism to be something more akin to the progressive ideals a program that's designed to restrain capitalism in order to save capitalism from itself. The New Deal was certainly not anti-capitalist by any means, and in fact, the National Labor Relations Act was criticized by a lot of more radical unions like the Industrial Workers of the World, who saw it as merely pacifying growing unrest among the American working class. However, if you listen to right-leaning commentators at the time, they were sure that this meant the beginning of a very scary communist America. Likewise, the idea of Republicans being both against this and for a specific kind of social policy still wouldn't become a thing for quite a few years, and surprise, surprise, a lot of that political realignment was around racial beliefs during the 1960s.
Ugh.
Mencken, for the New Deal, not having that shit. And in fact, I think this is the moment that really cements the combination of social liberalism and an almost religious love of capitalism, like absurd.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to quote from Mencken here. He said, "We owe it to almost everything that passes under the general name of civilization today. The extraordinary progress of the world since the Middle Ages has not been due to the mere expenditure of human energy, nor even to the flights of human genius, for men have worked hard since the remotest times, and some of them had been of surpassing intellect. No, it has been due to the accumulation of capital. That accumulation provided the machinery that gradually diminished human drudgery and liberated the spirit of the worker, who had been formerly almost indistinguishable from a mule." Meow. Sorry.
No, thank you. That was beautiful.
I don't know. Do mules make regular donkey noises, right?
Yeah,
Great.
I think so.
Great. Okay. I've never seen a mule in person.
Might need Eamon to look this up. And then off he goes. Okay.
Making our producer look up mule stuff.
Oh, yes. What noises
we'll
do
mule
mules
stuff for
make?
money.
Yes. Oh, Nock, of course, was right on board with these ideas and wrote a widely influential book during those years called Our Enemy, the State. This book is a huge inspiration on later right libertarians and quoted some of Mencken's commentary on the state. In its text, he argued that the means of politics for achieving one's aims was inherently violent and unhealthy. I'll quote it here. "There are two methods, or means, and only two, whereby man's needs and desires can be satisfied. One is the production and exchange of wealth. This is the economic means. The other is the uncompensated appropriation of wealth produced by others. This is the political means. The primitive exercise of the political means was, as we have seen, by conquest, confiscation, expropriation, and the introduction of a slave economy. The conqueror parceled out conquered territory among beneficiaries, who thenceforth satisfied their needs and desires by exploiting the labor of enslaved inhabitants. The feudal state and the merchant state, wherever found, merely took over and developed successively the heritage of character, intention, and the apparatus of exploitation which the primitive state transmitted to them. They are in essence merely higher integrations of the primitive state."
This, of course, ignores the very real problems of how large businesses and even small capitalist firms had leveraged the power of the state to quell workers' rebellions, in many cases through direct violence, which led to the state literally killing workers. From the Pullman strikes to the Battle of Blair Mountain, this happened a lot of times in the 1800s and early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
We can't dive into those, but we'll leave some sources in the show notes. Now, Nock continues on to accuse FDR and those associated with him of a coup d'etat, which is a crazy thing to say. I'll read the passage that he says it in. "This regime was established by a coup d'etat of a new and unusual kind, practicable only in a rich country. It was effected not by violence like Louis Napoleon's approach, or by terrorism like Mussolini's, but by purchase. It therefore presents what might be called an American variant of the coup d'etat. Our national legislature was not suppressed by force of arms like the French Assembly in 1851, but was brought out of its functions with public money. And as appeared most conspicuously in the elections of November 1934, the consolidation of the coup d'etat was effected by the same means. The corresponding functions in the smaller units were reduced under the personal control of the executive." And this, I hope you all realize, is absolute fucking hogwash. To be clear, FDR did expand some federal powers into the executive branch, and he did fuck some things up, but this is not him lording over all Americans as a tyrannical leader, and nor was it an extension of the powers of rich people purchasing the government, which we all seem to be experiencing now. We know what that looks like. We're going through it. We should acknowledge that FDR did some awful things, though. There's no reasonable excuse for the internment of people of Japanese descent in America, no matter how brutal World War II was. But these guys weren't caught up on that. They were caught up on the expansion of workers' rights and the welfare state. It's absurd.
Yeah. Oy.
I think the last, big feature of libertarianism here, the big one, the real meat and potatoes from which the rest of the characteristics spring. They have an almost allergic reaction to grouping people together for any common good except that which is done in a market for business purposes. They oppose what they call quote-unquote collectivism, or anything antithetical to what they understood to be individualism. Collectivism is this catch-all term for any kind of thought, philosophy, or action with references to people working together for a common good and not out of profit. It's communism, socialism, labor unions, the existence of a social safety net, you name it. They will compare it to fascism. They will say all states are the same. For Mencken, this is more of just an obvious feature of his work without a specific use of that word, but it was referenced in correspondence to him, especially with the topic of our next episode. We'll get into that. For Nock, though, it was central to his ideology and comes up a lot in his work, from his aforementioned book, Our Enemy the State, to his memoirs. I'll read a quote from those memoirs here, because this one just struck me in a way. He said, "I wonder how many such men in America would know that communism, the New Deal, fascism, Nazism are merely so many trade names for collectivist statism, like the trade names for toothpastes, which are all exactly alike except for the flavoring." Which, that's a crazy thing to say. There's nothing alike about most of those things.
No.
There are very clear defining differences. The only thing they have in common is having a government, which, is a thing that people have been doing for a long time.
Yep. To Nock, and basically every figure on the libertarian right in the future, this is the main gripe. All their political systems are cooked down to this simple idea. Anything other than capitalism with a minimalist or non-existent government and no unions was collectivism, and something to be feared and destroyed. They see this as putting down individuals and making them subservient to a larger cause. While there's some merit to at least considering this idea and examining how that we can genuinely hurt people, individual people, with collective action, especially in a kind of tyranny of the majority, a term coined by French classical liberal Alexis de Tocqueville, it plays out in real life as an allergic reaction to solidarity and collective action if made into the core of someone's philosophy. No one's going to argue against the fact that the excesses of certain states have become utterly destructive, as we are seeing right now in the United States, where our current regime is consolidating power and using it to brutalize all kinds of people, especially immigrants, queer people, and anyone that isn't in the desirable categories of white, cisgender, heterosexual, and of a certain subset of Christian beliefs. It would be silly to ignore the excesses of power that can absolutely destroy genuine human freedom and quality of life. But to simplify every political philosophy on this line is both genuinely misguided and exactly what right libertarianism is about.
To conclude this episode, I've said it a million times, and I'll say it for the audience here. There are two aspects to the state, both used to get people to do what society is prioritizing: the carrot and the stick. The carrot is positive reinforcement through things like social safety nets, job programs, housing programs, healthcare initiatives, and all that lovely stuff that genuinely benefits people. The stick is policing, militarism, force in general. Is a government that's only using the stick smaller? Sure, but it's a government that loses the focus on the end goal, to make people's lives better. We band together to make people's lives better. That's
exactly
the simple purpose.
Yep.
Having safety programs cooked into the state isn't an inherently bad idea, but we've seen what happens when people prioritize the stick. It's a fucking police state where people drain the money from medical care and putting it into locking people in cages. Plain and simple. Our next two episodes will be visited by the wonderful journalist and researcher of right-wing fuckery, Laura Jedeed, to discuss Ayn Rand and her philosophy that she likes to call objectivism. What a stuck-up bitch Ayn Rand was.
She really was.
Just the worst. And we're going to spend 2 episodes talking about just how awful she was.
Fantastic.
And then we'll talk about some more of her contemporaries. This is going to be a long series, 11 episodes on libertarianism. We got a lot of cool guests coming up, and I'll let you guys just be surprised by how fucking great it's going to get. But if you like what we're doing and you want to spread it, please share our website, thecrumbling.com. Very easy to find now. Go to our Patreon if you want to pay us to keep doing what we're doing. You can find the link at our website, thecrumbling.com, or you can go directly to patreon.com/thecrumblingpodcast. We also publish some articles about various things. We put our show notes on Beehive. Go to wherever you get podcasts and listen. Suggest the show to your friends. I hope that what we're doing brings value to you and some clarity in a world that is very fucking muddy and crumbling.
Maybe one day we'll, I don't know, do live shows or something. Who knows?
Beg?
Yeah, I'll definitely do some of that.
Do weird stuff.
Yeah.
Weird stuff. Our producer does not like
No, he does
not like that. I guess maybe we won't do weird stuff.
We
Thanks
won't do
everybody
weird
for
stuff.
listening.
No ooh-woo.
No ooh-woo ever, except for that one ooh-woo.
Don't accidentally.